Start our meeting tonight. Prior to our meeting, we had our annual reorganizational meeting, and the board elected the following members. Myself, Bob Tanner as chair, Scott Calhoun as vice chair, and Charles Falk as secretary. Before we start, I'd like to make sure that everyone's signed in for this meeting in the back entrance of the room. If you've not, please do so at this time. This must be on the record. I'm Bob Tanner. The board members here tonight are Scott Calhoun and Charles Falk. I'd like to introduce the following members. We have Matthew Puz, Zoning and Development Officer, Julie Maggio, Assistant Zoning and Development Officer, Jeremy Toman, Board Solicitor, Mark Oxy, Court Reporter. After presentation by the appellant, the board will hear from those in question the appeal, those in favor, and those opposed. Any documents or evidence that's presented must be kept for a period of 60 days for our records. And after all presentations are made, the board will recess. We'll then reconvene and make our decisions. The board has up to 45 days to render a decision, but they're usually made this evening. If you do not care to wait for the decision, you may call the zoning officer in the morning after 8:30. And now I ask that everyone please stand and be sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please answer, I do.
I do.
Thank you. All right, first appeal is number 25-01, Lori Strandwitz, for property located at 702 Wingate Road, seeking a variance to expand a non-conforming use beyond 25% of the total gross floor area of the structure in the Presque Isle Gateway District.
Yes.
Please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and tell us about why you're here.
I'm Lori Strandwitz, and I am buying a house in Mill Creek after 45 years in a house in Fairview, and 702 Wingate. And in order to downsize to 1,300 square feet, I'm a painter, and my husband's 91, so I wanted a sunroom, which it didn't have, and I wanted a garage, which it didn't have. So I hired Straw Hat Construction, Robert Gallo, and drew up my plans for this addition. And of course, it was way more than 25%, which I, at that time, didn't know. So what I decided to do was, apply for a variance on the garage and go ahead and build the sunroom, because I think that's the room that both of us will be using a lot. Of course, I would like to have a garage because it's, snowing around here. But yeah, that's why I filed for the variance.
Okay. Matt, so our issue is we're limited to 25%, which would be 96 feet. Is that what you're saying?
The max expansion would have been 288, but 192 square foot addition was approved. The rear sun porch you had mentioned. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
that's already been approved.
yes,
So
correct. So which left 96 square feet left for the expansion of the garage.
and we're talking expansion of non-conforming use. I mean, why couldn't a garage just be added as a outbuilding as typical?
Yes. Get to it. So section 145.23F, no, I'm sorry, not F, E, accessory uses permitted by right. Says any use in their accompanying structures that are customarily subordinate and incidental to an approved permitted use, special exception, or conditional use are permitted by right, including but not limited to the following, private garage being one of them. However, when you go to permitted uses, special exception, or conditional use, single family dwellings not listed. So my reading of that is that if it's not specifically called out, then it can't be an accessory use to that use. Correct, yeah, single-family dwellings are not a permitted use in that district.
And when you made the update to the zoning ordinance, every single family dwelling in the PI district became a non-conforming use. So anybody that wants to do any expansion has to come, if it exceeds the 25%.
Okay. Any questions? Scott? Ben?
I don't have
Yeah. Okay, I don't have any other questions for you this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience like to speak on this? Okay. Lydia, Township, have anything? Okay, thank you. Appeal dash 25-02, Robert G. Dwyer for property located at 3916 Montrose Avenue, seeking dimensional variance from the minimum bluff setback from top of bluff in a bluff precision setback act for substantial improvement of a residential property in R1 single-family residential district.
And before we start, I do have to recuse myself due to conflicts. Mr. Dwyer is a former attorney at the same law firm that I work for. So so long as nobody has any objection, I guess my plan would be to draft the adjudication based on the board's decision, and I will refrain from participating in that.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm Liz Lincoln, the daughter of Bob and Mo Dwyer, the homeowners. Our plan is to knock down the existing structure and rebuild on the same footprint. And we're requesting a dimensional variance from the minimum bluff setback based on being lakefront property. The property itself is not on a bluff. It's a tree-covered hillside that is walkable up and down, but just based on where it's located, it's in the bluff recession zone. The footprint of the proposed rebuild, again, is substantially on the same footprint, little bit of a different location, and as Eric, our contractor, is just providing you, the adjustment that's being made reduces the square footage that's beyond that setback line nominally, so,
Is this the same drawing that was in the packet
yes.
previously? Okay. And then, you know, it says it's within 50-foot setback. What is the dimension, the closest point? Do we have that?
The closest point to,
To the bluff, top of bluff. I know we're within the 50-foot, I can see where the dashed line is, but just for,
I mean, I don't know the exact dimension of that.
Okay.
I mean, we proposed this on our, you know, we would have to have Larry go down there and mark it out and everything like
Okay.
that.
We do feel it's important, though, that, you know, a visual inspection of the property would clearly show that it's not a bluff. My family's lived there for 40 years. There's been no erosion in that time. And judging by the trees that are on the hillside, you know, we're guessing hundreds of years, no erosion problem at all. So again, hoping that
right, I saw the documentation from Shelby Clark too.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Mhm.
Mhm. Sharon, for your adjudication purposes, is that dimension,
Was that?
is that dimension important to you for?
I mean, it's, I guess, based on the visual, I can see where the, I guess, the setback line is based on top of bluff, but it's, you know, to be confirmed by a representative. So, I mean, I don't know specifically if it's that germane to it.
Okay. So a lot of times we talk dimensional, it's not truly dimensional variance,
Right.
it kind of is.
Do you happen to have, Matt, any indication or anything? Because it sounded like you were at the location, correct?
Correct, yes, I was out there with Shelby Clark, Mr. Dwyer, and believe Steve Kopak from Laird's office. I will say in the information that Mr. Dwyer had submitted, he states, I think in the third paragraph, the reason for this application is that a relatively small portion of the northeast corner of our residence, which will be reconstructed with the same dimensions as the existing residence, but being located approximately 8 feet to the east of the current location, is approximately 45 feet from the top of a heavily tree-covered hillside on the northern portion of our property. If the top of the hillside is considered to be a bluff, the setback requirement is 50 foot.
So, I mean.
Seems like he's asking for about 5 foot.
5 feet, based on your observation, that seemed to be about,
I would say 5 to 8, somewhere in there.
Okay. I mean, the point, we can obviously tell on this footprint overlay that it is less intrusive than it currently is. I mean, we know
Correct.
that, but, you know, sometimes those dimensional numbers are important, so. When you say the entire bluff, there are units down at the bottom, we've been there before.
Directly down, there is no units, it's just a little to the east that there
Okay.
is that development.
There's a beach area at the bottom.
Correct, a beach
There's
club.
nothing on your property at the bottom, right?
Correct.
And you understand, so this is shown as the actual structure, realizing that any additional structures would change that. 'Cause I see there's an existing deck and patios. I don't know if there are thoughts of those sort of things, but, you know, with the deck itself, it would apply if it's attached. It would have to be a part of that, right? That
Correct.
setback. So that would be a further encroachment, just to keep in mind as you
Okay.
further this on. I mean, what's shown here, I mean, is there gonna, you're gonna require a survey from Laird showing this, right?
Correct.
When we get a zoning permit, so.
We would have Larry pin his house, so I mean, it would all,
Oh, sure.
so Larry would pin it all. But if it was a patio paver deck, then that wouldn't fall into the same thing, correct?
Right,
If it's not attached to the house.
Right, it's just if it's attached, I just wanna make sure that everybody kind of is on the same page with that, and, you know, the reason for my hesitation, some of my questions is that I wanna make sure that what we're looking at here, that if we say, sure, you can build in the setback area, then it's not that you're trying to do this, it's a foot away from the setback.
Well, every municipality is different with this. It's very different from Northeast to Mill Creek
Sure.
to Fairview, so,
Millbrook being the least stringent.
yeah.
So that's why, you know what I mean, to go to this line is certainly a conversation. I mean, it's no further than the existing line. I mean, we can write it that it doesn't encroach any further. If the request is to be exempt from the bluff setback, that would be basically free reign for the entire backyard, which, you know, that is not what you want to do. Just want to make sure that we have it documented on our side.
So your construction's gonna move closer to Montrose than it is current, is that correct? You're moving closer to the road?
Yes,
Yes, okay, that's
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
yeah, it's said
So your house is coming further away from the bluff.
yeah, it's said
Correct.
differently, yeah, it's moving away from the bluff.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I don't have anything else, no, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have for now, unless Lydia has anything. No? Okay. Anyone in the audience have anything they'd like to contribute on this? Okay. Appeal number 25-03, Dale and Jennifer White for property located at 1552 Coons Road, seeking a use variance for limited lodging in the R1 Single Family Residential District.
And so we're.
You can state your name and address first.
Oh, yeah, Dale White, 1552 Coons Road,
Thank you.
and we're property, currently there's a business variance for photography. When we bought it, it was a business variance for agriculture, business and agriculture, and we switched it to photography. Now we're requesting to change the variance to limited lodging.
So, when you state that it's currently used as, what is the current zoning map? What are the allowed uses?
It's in the R1 single-family residential district,
Okay.
single-family dwellings, I would
What
say
the
parks,
photography
churches.
business you're talking about, you said you're currently
Yeah.
allowed, is that?
Do you want me to go?
Wait, I have a point of clarification on that.
Yes.
So they indicated they have a variance to have this photography studio, but per the adjudication that's in your package, it appears that they have a special exception for a home occupation, which is different than a variance. And a home occupation is a specifically defined provision
Mhm.
in the ordinance. So photography studio, I believe in the current R1 district would not be a separately permitted use. But home occupation would be an accessory by special exception under the current,
Okay.
so.
Okay, that answers that. So that really has no bearing on another use for the property.
That would be my position, and the previous special exception was for a home occupation. And that is, again, under the old ordinance specifically defined, under the new ordinance specifically defined. And from the township perspective, Airbnb would not be a home occupation.
Right.
So they would be seeking a separate variance to utilize the property in that fashion.
And there are no sort of special exceptions or anything like that for limited lodging or Airbnb?
No, limited lodging is limited to a specific area in the township, the limited lodging overlay district, the
Mhm.
PI district, the MU1 district, and the MU2 district. Nowhere else.
Right. So currently using the home as a residence and photography studio and vacation rental.
Yes.
But the vacation rental is not,
Is that proposed rental? Is that what you're talking about?
So we've been up, what essentially happened was that during COVID, when everything was shut down, we just moved to Scotland in 2019 to be closer to my family in the fall. In the spring, we were out of jobs from COVID in Scotland, and we had a family renting the Coons Road property. We then, because of COVID, and we hadn't been in Scotland long enough to be able to get any help financially, we had no jobs, so we came back, and the family moved out because of COVID. So we were left with this property and no income. Prior to going to Scotland, we put the property on the market to sell it. The realtors came in and said, this is going to sell right away, priced it at a certain price. Lots of interest, but nobody would buy it. Essentially, the property's not, it's a family property, but because of the busyness of Coons Road, no families were really looking at it. It's too big for a first-time buyer type property, and not really suitable for an older residence, if you like, so it seems it's a little bit stuck. So we had no jobs, we ended up putting it on VRBO to see if we could generate an income. We pleasantly discovered that lots of families at that point were looking for a place that they could meet because of COVID. They weren't vacationing, they couldn't meet anywhere else. We had lots of families meet from Rochester, whose family was from Cleveland, and they would meet in the middle. And the success of that enabled us to upkeep the property, balance out our financial sort of state. Then it kept going. When Mill Creek came out with the specific Airbnb information, maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we came in on day one to try to explain the scenario, and it was communicated, it wasn't clear where it fell, so we thought we were doing the right thing coming in on day one. We thought we would come, give it a little bit of time, and we'd come back in, and then, times passed, and we received a letter saying that we can't operate it as a vacation rental. So for us, given the nature of Kuntz Road is much more like a through road than a cul-de-sac. Obviously R1 is broad, and I didn't actually realise it wasn't a business, but we were led to believe, or our limited understanding, that it was a business variance that was on it. But basically that properties now as a vacation rental is what's enabled us to really feed our family and pay for our property. We've since focused on short-term rentals and actually brought in over $800,000 of investment money to Erie. We're not seeing the fruit of that yet, but those dollars have been brought in from outside investors to develop short-term rentals, and that's been going quite well. Obviously, the short-term rentals, every dollar we bring in, I think is worth two that we pass around, really, in a microeconomy, and the value to those small businesses is obviously in the area. The quirky sort of nature the Airbnb guests tend to like the local businesses over the large chains, and thankfully we have Kim here, one of our neighbours, who can vouch for the upkeep and what it's enabled us to do with the property and improve the area. And like my wife said it best, that we don't warn our neighbours about our Airbnb guests. We actually warn our Airbnb guests about a couple of our neighbours that the police keep getting called out to. So the nature of it, we think, has helped enhance the area and certainly helped us get our financial life back on track, so to speak.
So, when we talk about a variance, there's certain characteristics, and you've mentioned a number of times about the characteristics of Kuntz Road. When did you buy the property?
We bought it in 2010, and we had one young child on the way. It was easy to manage with one child, but then we had my wife had a child already that I adopted. Child 2 and 3 came along, we couldn't handle the busyness of the streets, so we have another property that we moved further out into as well.
Sure. Well, the characteristics of the road, you'd agree, haven't really changed since you purchased the home.
No, it's a busy throughway.
Well, it is what it was. I mean, the road didn't turn from a 2-lane to a 4-lane or things like that, you know what I mean? So obviously there was a value for you to purchase it at that time, and there'd be a value for someone else to certainly purchase it, especially in that kind of time frame with the escalation we've seen in residential properties. So that's something we have to take into account, because
How close are you to Page Street?
0.4 of a mile. And 0.3 of a mile from the Granada.
I'm familiar with that, I just didn't know how close it is.
if this variance were not to be granted, what would your plans be?
Well, I'd have to pull back on the investing and essentially, find a 9-to-5 job, which obviously I can do. It's just it's a missed opportunity for us. In 2019 and 20, we had, over a certain period, we had like so many missed payments with our loan payments, because my 9-to-5 job couldn't keep us afloat with what we were trying to do with the investment side of it. Obviously, I have family in Scotland as well, which is a bit of a, it's compounded for us because my father has epilepsy and he can't get travel insurance to come to the US. So of course we want our children to know their grandparents. So we have to make more money to make sure that we can get our family back, so just the 9-to-5 alone doesn't quite cut it.
Okay. So, with the property itself, I'm saying if you're not occupying the property, you have the ability to sell the property or do something else.
We would try again, yeah.
Yeah.
They came in and put it on the market for 380,000, and we dropped it basically with no takers. That was 2019, late 18, early 19. Which obviously is not anybody's responsibility here, but that's
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Scott. Jeremy?
Aside from Coons Road being busy, which, you testified that it was busy at the time when you purchased it as well. Has anything else changed with respect to the property? Is there any physical condition associated with the property that would necessitate you having to do this?
Obviously not with the property. Property hasn't changed. Obviously the times changed in terms of COVID came, and without that we would have got nothing, And there's nothing per se with the property itself that's changed or limits me from
Using it as a single-family home.
right.
Okay, nothing further.
Okay. Yeah, that's all we have this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, for those who don't know me, my name is Lydia Caparosa. I'm counsel for the township. As I mentioned earlier, the township does have a position with respect to this variance request. Again, to clarify, the previous issuance from the zoning hearing board was for special exception, and we're not looking to address the special exception. We're looking to focus on the variance for Airbnbs. But it would be the township's position that no variance be granted with respect to the use of the Airbnb, given that the property is located in the R1 district. That the township has specifically excluded limited lodging from the R1 district, so they've made a policy decision that they do not want Airbnbs in the residential districts, and that, has identified specific areas within the township where they are permitted. PI district, limited lodging overlay district, MU1, MU2, and I do have a map that outlines where those areas are permitted that I can provide to you all. And even to the extent that they were utilizing the property as an Airbnb starting in 2019 or 2020, that was still not a conforming use of the property because Airbnbs and limited lodging were not permitted under the old zoning ordinance either. And then with respect to the variance request this evening, we don't feel that they present any evidence that would meet the standards outlined in the zoning ordinance for a variance. There's really no unique physical circumstances relative to the property. It can be used as a single-family dwelling in conformance with the zoning ordinance as it stands. Allowing this would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. I understand it's a busy thoroughfare, but if you look at the zoning map, the majority of that area is zoned R1. I understand it's close to P Street, but the majority of that area is zoned R1, so it is single-family dwellings. There have been complaints relative to this particular Airbnb that have been received by the township, so there is concern that that is impacting the neighborhood as well.
Is it possible
And
for
I'm
you to
happy.
speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What part?
I-
are you done?
I'm done just giving my general opinion. I'm happy to have Mr. Pez provide, confirmatory testimony as to exhibits as needed, but, generally our position is that the standards to meet a variance request particularly a use variance request, have not been met in this case.
Yeah. And then, obviously, just to speak to a complaint about an Airbnb, I mean, I think it gets an unfair shake. There's plenty of complaints going about local neighbours anyway in our area. Obviously, the characteristics of Prince Road is very different to Bryant Road or the road behind or Washington, the cul-de-sac. It's a different. I understand every municipality is different, but you know they have a RLB for the city, which obviously every municipality is different. But as we progress, we develop things. 38th Street would have once been strictly R1 and now is RLB for limited business because the nature of the street lends itself more to a throughway than a traditional R1. But the complaints, the benefits of it on the local businesses and community far outweigh the negatives. We have the neighbours on one side. There's police are called there often or were for a period. We wake up one morning and the guys are peeing in the bush because they've had a pool party. These are the local neighbours, not the Airbnb neighbours. So, whereas I understand there's certain parameters and, I think that one's kind of null and void when you think about what complaints are made. It's not because it's an Airbnb that the complaint is made, or it may be, but I mean, there's plenty of complaints on R1 about R1s. So to me, it just seems a little unfair for that to be brought up as a factor, although I do understand there's parameters that this might not fly, but in terms of creating the context for an argument, I don't think that's a valid one myself.
Understood, yeah, it goes both ways. The big thing that she hit on is, in order for us to grant a variance, there's several factors, and the only one that, you kind of brought up was, making it unique, was the busyness of the road. I'll agree with you, Coons Road is a little bit busier than maybe a 25-mile-an-hour road a block away, where it always has been. Nothing's changed the characteristic of that road. Traffic counts have been reasonable enough for you to purchase it as an R1 home at one point, and all of your neighbors. So there's nothing been done that really changed that characteristic to not make it R1.
And then, so for a place like the Commons, the Old Granada, and the nursing home on the corner, how would you go about changing the from an R1 for those areas? Is it possible to do something like that, or is that out of the question?
If I may, I believe Granada is already zoned, not part of R1.
It's R3.
It's R3, so it's not even an R1 district.
Right, but that's what I mean, like how it's been zoned that way at a certain time on the nursing home. Is it possible to, or is it, I guess I'm obviously.
We can grant a variance as far as rezoning, that goes before the supervisors. If a property is, there can be a request to rezone a property, yes, but that's not something we can grant a variance. We aren't able to rezone anything.
Okay, thank you.
I can be quick with Mr. Paz just to get certain
Okay.
documents into evidence for you all. Mr. Paz, do you need a microphone?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I believe the board already knows who Mr. Paz is, but for the audience, could you please identify your role in the township?
Hi, Matthew Puz Jr., Zoning and Development Officer, Mill Creek Township.
And I'm going to show you a document marked as Exhibit A. Is this a collection of excerpts from the township's current zoning ordinance that address the limited lodging overlay, limited lodging generally, variances generally, and the uses permitted in the R1 district?
Yes.
And this is an accurate copy of the current zoning ordinance, correct?
I would assume. Yes.
I will represent that I pulled it from the current version.
Okay.
And if I direct you to, it's page 19, but the definition of limited lodging. And that provides it is only permitted in the MU1, MU2, PI districts, or the limited lodging overlay district, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to show you a document on Market Exhibit B. Could you please identify this document for me?
This looks like a map showing where the limited lodging is permitted in Mill Creek Township.
So it's the hash mark area as well as the blue and green areas are the only areas where limited lodging is permitted in the township, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And then, turning to page, it's the second page in the packet, excuse me, page 45 in the packet that I provided you on Exhibit A. And that is the uses for single family dwelling in section 145-15, correct?
Correct.
And, in the permitted uses under 145-15B, is limited lodging identified as a use?
No.
Is it identified in 145-15C as a special exception?
No.
And I'm going to direct you to page 110 in that packet. Section 145-61. Are these the specific regulations relative to limited lodging?
In the zoning ordinance, yes.
And I'm going to direct you finally to page 200 in that packet, to specifically 145-106B, 4A, which starts on 200 and goes to 201. Are those the standards identified in the zoning ordinance for granting a variance?
Yes.
And based on your hearing of the testimony provided tonight, has any evidence been provided, sufficient evidence been provided to meet this standard for use variance, in your opinion?
I mean, generally, I do not comment on that as it's a function of the zoning hearing board.
Nope, that's fair. I will defer that to them. Jenna, do you have a copy of the zoning map by chance? If not, I will. If not, I have a bigger one too. You might prefer that.
No.
Mr. President, I'm going to show you a document marked as Exhibit C. Could you please identify this document?
This looks like, this is the most up-to-date zoning ordinance map, excuse me, the zoning map.
And the yellow color, that indicates the R1 district, correct?
Correct.
And I know this is all very small, but could you identify where the Coons Road property is at? Is an issue here? In that general area?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I will demonstrate for you all. Generally, to this orange log over here, that's Granada. So it's in this general area. So,
And that's the R1.
yes, yellow is R1, that's Granada, but the yellow is the R1, the property is in this, on this is Coons Road. So, would you agree with me that the surrounding area, aside from the one R3, is predominantly zoned R1?
Yes.
And does the current zoning ordinance permit limited lodging or Airbnbs in the R1 district?
No.
And were you involved with the drafting and preparation of the current zoning ordinance?
Yes.
And would it be a fair statement to say that limited lodging was specifically excluded from the R1 district
Yes.
intentionally?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Okay.
I do have a follow-up question. Matt, under the previous zoning ordinance, would this use have been permitted? It was previously zoned R1 as well,
Yeah,
correct?
it's always been R1.
Okay, and would it have been permitted under that ordinance?
No, in that case, we fell on the slice of life case that came out of Pennsylvania regarding limited lodging being excluded, yes, by right.
So then, even if the use was used prior to this change in the zoning ordinance, it still would be a non-permitted use?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience like to speak on this?
I will.
Please come on up.
I'm Dr. Kim Hunsaker. I live on 1515 Winslow Drive, so I share a backyard with Dale and Jen with the property. And I mean, I get the zoning piece. I know that you can't change the law, but I can attest. I grew up in Kearsarge. I was born on 54th in Washington, so I've been in that area for 38 years. I guess I'm just curious on like what data do you have to support that Coons Road hasn't increased in traffic? Because I lived there, like I said, 38 years. The traffic has increased exponentially. I mean, that intersection going down Coons Road to Peach is treacherous. I'll sit at that light for 20 minutes sometimes.
The onus would be on the applicant to give that data.
Okay.
I'm just saying that
No, I'm just
it was a 35-mile-an-hour road. It is a 35-mile-an-hour road.
It's about a 50 mile per hour.
Right. I can't, that's the police department. Not us.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
No, and I'm
that part there, I'm just saying the road hasn't changed in characteristic. The speed limit hasn't changed, it hasn't widened lanes. We have a certain amount of criteria we have to go through to grant these variances, and that would be on the applicant to give substantive proof or data, maybe the road changed to 4 lanes, maybe the neighboring properties changed, they have their zoning change, whatever it may be, there are certain criteria that haven't been met.
And does an applicant present traffic? I mean, how does one obtain that type of data to show and support that, that the area has changed?
That's on the applicant. It's not our reason to prove
No.
otherwise.
But I mean, where do you even?
There are traffic reports, there are things like that. I mean,
Okay.
professionals who can get that information, but
Yeah.
that's one little piece of the puzzle. I was just mentioning that because that was the one piece that was mentioned. There's a whole list of criteria, so even if that criteria were mentioned, there might be a lot of other data. We're not talking about a long time period from purchase to sale. It's not, oh, this property's been listed for sale for 8 years, we haven't been able to sell it at this kind of rate. I can highly, with a high level of certainty, looking at the purchase price, could be a pretty nice return right now in 2025 with that home listed for sale. We all know that.
With the housing market now, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure. So it's not a situation like that. If that brought about, there was some other reason, I don't know what the reason might be that you would bring up, but
Yeah.
that would be an example. I mean, it's not been tried to use in strict accordance with the law, with the ordinance.
Yeah,
there
and I'm
is-
just,
Yeah, when you look at the elements of a variance, it's looking at the physical characteristics associated with the property at issue. So, we're giving some deference and allowing him to introduce, potential evidence that would, be outside of that particular property. But if you look at the letter of the law, I mean, we're looking at, is there any unique physical characteristics associated with this property that would necessitate the
Yeah.
variance request?
and when you look at any property that's going to be an Airbnb, wouldn't the characteristics of the property be a home? I mean, technically.
It'd be a very difficult threshold
Yeah.
to pass, and that's why it's, that type of use is permitted in other districts specifically, and that's why the ordinance was drafted in that manner.
And I can just say, I mean, I just live behind them, and I have never, ever had an issue. Actually, the property has been greatly improved since they turned it into an Airbnb. The lawn is much improved, the landscaping is beautiful, the house has been recently remodeled and updated. We've never, ever had an issue. I know that doesn't hold any weight here or anything like that. But I guess my thought is, why wouldn't Mill Creek want a property that's going to bring business and travelers into that area by the law? I just think that would be
So-
beneficial.
It's a good question. That's a question for next level up with the supervisors, to be honest with you, because as a zoning hearing board, we don't make those laws, we take the interpretations of them to grant or not variances. The zoning ordinance was written very strongly, as Scaparosa asked Mr. Puzz, against allowing these, and there's a lot of language in there that does not give us much flexibility to grant them, because they didn't want this to happen. People would come in and very loosely be able to be granted, because they really do not want them in our home.
Yeah, and it makes sense, just the nature of that area has changed so much with LECOM especially. I mean, it's becoming, it's kind of encroaching, and I know I want to protect my residential area too, but my fear is who's going to buy that house and what's it going to look like? You know, I love the neighbors that we have, and I just think it's improved that property, but.
Sure.
That's fine, just, so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to take a recess, and as stated previously, you can wait for when we come back, or you can call the zoning office tomorrow morning. right, let the record show that we reconvened at about 7:12. On appeal number 25-1, Lori Grandwitz, do I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So moved. Appeal number 25-02, Robert Dwyer, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve as per the plans provided.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So moved. Appeal number 25-03, Dale and Jennifer White, do I have a motion?
I have a motion to decline.
I'll second. All in favor of declining? Aye. All opposed? So moved. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. All in favor?